Welcome to Million Podcasts, where we break down the strategies, data, and tools that help podcasters grow, monetize, and build better opportunities. Your show has 500 loyal listeners who never skip an episode. A brand tells you that is not enough. Here is what the data actually shows. Podcast ad spend hit $2.43 billion in 2024, and sponsors paid podcast sponsorship rates that reward audience alignment over raw size. Brands are hunting for the right podcasts right now, not only the biggest ones. The question is whether your show passes their checklist. In this guide, we'll cover why download numbers alone do not tell the full picture, the 5 critical data points every sponsor requests before signing, the audience quality markers that unlock premium sponsorship rates, and the industry benchmark sponsors use to evaluate your show. We'll also look at why sponsors pay more for smaller shows with the right fit, how sponsors actually make the final decision behind the scenes, and the red flags that kill sponsorship deals before they start. Then we'll cover the complete sponsor evaluation checklist you can use to audit your show now, how to build sponsor confidence when your numbers are still growing, and what sponsors want to see in your first pitch. We'll also explain how top sponsors actually find podcasts to partner with, what happens after you land your first sponsor, and the myths that stop podcasters from landing sponsors. And finally, we'll answer the most frequently asked questions about podcast sponsorship. This guide unpacks exactly what podcast sponsors look for before they sign a deal. You will learn which 5 data points they always request, which 7 red flags make them walk away, and how to position your podcast so the decision becomes easy. You have thousands of downloads, but sponsors still aren't interested. Why? Because a big download number does not automatically mean you have a valuable advertising audience. Most podcasters believe big download counts automatically unlock sponsorship deals. That assumption costs real opportunities. Yes, downloads still matter, but in 2026, sponsors dig deeper. They care more about who listens and what those listeners do next. Engagement metrics now outweigh raw download counts in most sponsor evaluations, because a number showing how many people pressed play says nothing about whether those listeners actually acted on what they heard. A tight-knit audience that acts on your recommendations can be commercially more valuable than a much larger audience that barely pays attention. And that is exactly what sponsors want to see. Proof that your listeners care about what you say. That proof shows up in engagement signals, not download totals. So if downloads aren't the whole story, what numbers are sponsors actually looking for? When a sponsor reaches out to you or when you pitch them, they will ask for specific numbers. Having these ready makes you look professional and can speed up the decision. There are 5 key data points you should have prepared. First, your 30-day download numbers per episode. Advertisers care about how many times an episode is downloaded within the first 30 days of its release because this is the industry standard metric. Not your total downloads across your entire back catalog. Not your follower count. Just the 30-day window per episode. That window gives sponsors a consistent baseline to compare your show against others. Track this number for your last 10 episodes, then report the average. Second, your listener demographics. Sponsors want specifics. They want to know the age range of your audience, their income level, where they are located, the gender split, education level, and their job roles or industries. You can pull this data from your podcast host analytics or from listener surveys. Even basic demographics help. Modern sponsors want detailed audience insights because they are not just buying downloads. They are buying access to specific listeners. Third, your completion rate and drop-off points. Completion rate tells sponsors how many listeners finish your episodes. Mid-roll ad placements consistently outperform pre-roll because listeners who make it halfway through an episode are more deeply engaged and significantly less likely to skip the break. Shows with high completion rates earn stronger ad recall because attentive listeners actually process the message rather than tune it out. If your completion rate sits above 70%, sponsors see that as a green light. Track where people drop off, fix those sections, and then show sponsors the improved numbers. Fourth, listener behavior signals. How engaged is your audience beyond just listening? Sponsors look at reviews and ratings, social media mentions, direct messages and emails, newsletter open rates, and community participation. These signals prove that your audience cares, and that matters more than you think. And finally, your growth trajectory over time. Are you trending up or are you flat? Sponsors favor shows with momentum, so show them your month-over-month growth. Even a 10 to 15% increase signals that your audience is expanding and your content resonates. If your numbers are flat, frame it differently. Focus on retention. A stable, loyal audience that sticks around is still commercially valuable. The important thing is to be honest about your growth pattern. Now, having the right number of listeners is one thing, but the quality of that audience is what can really make a sponsor say yes. Not all audiences are created equal. Sponsors pay premium rates for specific listener profiles, and there are a few things that make an audience especially commercially attractive. First, high-intent listeners who actually take action. 62% of listeners have considered using a product or service after hearing about it on a podcast, and 72% have visited an advertiser's website after hearing a podcast ad. Sponsors choose podcasts because listeners actually act on recommendations. If you can show that your audience follows through, sponsors will pay more. Track how many people clicked your affiliate links in the past, how many used promo codes, and how many signed up for free trials. Then put that data in your pitch. Another important factor is having an affluent and professional audience. 62.1% of adults listen to podcasts from Apple iPhones. Sponsors notice device data because it correlates with income level, and iPhone users tend to skew higher income compared to other platforms. Affluent professional listeners, such as executives, managers, and business owners, engage longer and are more likely to act on podcast recommendations, with over 60% listening monthly in the US. If your show attracts professionals, highlight that in your media kit. Then there are niche audiences with clear pain points. A podcast about general tech news competes with thousands of shows, but a podcast about cybersecurity compliance for healthcare IT directors? That is a niche. Sponsors targeting that exact buyer will pay premium rates because your audience is already pre-qualified. The narrower your niche, the easier it becomes to find aligned sponsors and command higher rates. And finally, loyal, returning listeners. 61% of podcasters now focus more on retention than downloads, showing increasing professional maturity among creators. Sponsors have noticed this shift. They would rather sponsor a show where 80% of listeners return every week than a show with big download spikes but no loyalty. Retention proves trust. Trust drives conversions. If your audience keeps coming back, sponsors see that as a signal that your recommendations will land. Knowing the benchmark sponsors use to evaluate shows helps you position yours realistically. Sponsors use CPM, or cost per mille, meaning the cost per 1,000 downloads, as their standard pricing framework. The rate they are willing to pay reflects how closely your audience matches their ideal buyer profile, which is why the engagement benchmarks below can carry more weight than your total download count. For a full 2026 breakdown of what rates to set at each audience size, niche, and ad format, see our complete podcast sponsorship rates guide. So, what engagement numbers are sponsors actually looking for? A review rate of at least 1 review per 100 downloads is a useful benchmark. For social shares, sponsors want to see listeners mentioning episodes at least once per week. If you have a newsletter, an email open rate between 25 and 35% is another positive signal. And for show notes links, a click-through rate of around 3 to 7% of listeners is a strong benchmark. If your numbers hit these benchmarks, highlight them in your pitch. They give sponsors a clearer picture of how engaged your audience really is. You might assume that bigger podcasts automatically get better sponsorship deals, but scale is not everything. Smaller shows can regularly command higher CPM rates than larger ones, especially when they offer the right audience and a stronger fit. The first reason is niche targeting. A brand selling accounting software for real estate investors does not need to reach 1 million random people. They need 500 real estate investors who are ready to buy. A focused podcast can deliver exactly that audience with very little wasted spend. Sponsors pay premium rates when targeting is tight. General shows force sponsors to pay for listeners who may never convert. Niche shows eliminate much of that waste. The second reason is trust. 50% of listeners say they trust podcast hosts more than hosts of other traditional media, including radio and TV. That trust can translate into higher conversion rates, especially when the host personally endorses a product. Sponsors know host read ads can outperform pre-recorded spots. A trusted host recommending a product feels more like a friend giving advice than a traditional advertisement. And finally, there is less competition for ad inventory. Big shows can sell out their ad slots months in advance. Smaller shows often have immediate availability. Sponsors who need to move quickly or test a campaign may choose a smaller show with open inventory rather than wait for a larger show. If you can deliver quickly and report results cleanly, sponsors remember that. Speed and flexibility create real commercial value. So, what actually happens when a brand is deciding whether to sponsor your podcast? Understanding that decision process can help you pitch much smarter. First, sponsors compare you against other shows. They rarely evaluate one podcast in isolation. They review multiple options in your niche and compare engagement rates, demographics, CPM costs, and audience fit. Your job is to make that comparison easy by presenting clean, organized data. A one-page media kit can help. Include your show description, listener demographics, engagement stats, recent episode topics, and sponsor package options. Keep it scannable because sponsors may be reviewing dozens of pitches. Next, they calculate expected ROI before committing. Sponsors run the numbers. They estimate how many conversions your show could deliver based on your engagement metrics and their historical conversion rates. If the math works, they move forward. You can help by showing past results. Saying, "Our last affiliate partner saw 47 clicks and 8 conversions from a single episode mention," is much stronger than simply saying, "We have engaged listeners." Specifics convert. Then they check your content history for brand safety. Sponsors may scan your recent episodes for controversial topics, offensive language, or anything that conflicts with their corporate policies. They may also look at your social media presence. So before pitching, review your last 10 episodes. If there is something a sponsor in your target category could find objectionable, address it first. And finally, expect sponsors to test with small commitments. Most brands prefer pilot deals before locking into long-term contracts. They want proof that your audience converts. That could mean an initial deal of 3 to 4 episodes or a single month. Treat those pilots seriously. Deliver clean reporting, show the results clearly, and make renewal easy. Because the real revenue often comes from repeat partnerships, not one-off deals. Now, before a sponsor says yes, there are also certain red flags that can make them walk away quickly. One of the biggest is an inconsistent publishing schedule. If your last 5 episodes dropped on random dates with no clear pattern, sponsors see that as a sign of unreliability. Sponsors often plan ad placements months in advance, so an erratic schedule makes campaign planning difficult. Pick a schedule and stick to it, whether that is weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. Consistency is important if you want sponsors to trust your show. Another red flag is not having a clear audience description. If you cannot explain who listens to your podcast in 2 sentences, sponsors will hesitate to take the risk. People interested in business is too vague. CFOs at SaaS companies with 50 to 200 employees navigating their first audit is specific enough to match with a sponsor. Write a 1-sentence listener description and make sure someone unfamiliar with your show can immediately understand who you serve. Poor audio quality or unprofessional production can also hurt a deal. Bad audio signals amateur effort, and sponsors worry that low production quality could reflect poorly on their brand. You do not need expensive equipment, but you do need clear voice levels, no background hiss or echo, clean edits without long dead air, and consistent volume across episodes. Fix the basics before you pitch. Another issue is misaligned content or values. Sponsors screen for brand safety. If your show covers topics that clash with their corporate values, they may walk away. The same is true if your audience would never buy their product. Before pitching, ask yourself, would my listeners actually use this product? If the answer is no, find a different sponsor. A bad match wastes everyone's time. Then there's the problem of having no tracking or attribution plan. If a sponsor asks how you will track results and you have no clear answer, the deal can die quickly. Sponsors need proof that their money drove an outcome. Set up tracking before you pitch. Use unique promo codes, dedicated landing pages, UTM-tagged links, or affiliate tracking platforms. Keep the tracking simple and clear, and explain it in your pitch. And finally, avoid loading your show with too many ads. If your 30-minute show has 6 different sponsors running ads in every episode, new sponsors may see clutter. Shorter ad breaks tend to retain more listeners, while every extra minute of advertising increases the chance that someone skips ahead or stops listening. Limit your ad placements and give each sponsor room to breathe. Quality over quantity keeps both listeners and sponsors happy. And if you want to see what these mistakes can actually cost creators, take a look at our podcast sponsorship case studies for some practical examples. Before you start pitching sponsors, take a moment to audit your podcast against the checklist sponsors are likely to use. Start with your audience data. You should be able to describe your listener in one sentence. Have demographic data such as age, income, location, and gender. Know your average 30-day downloads per episode, and track completion rates and drop-off points. Then look at your production quality. Your audio should be clear and professional. Episodes should be well edited without long dead air. And your intro, outro, and volume levels should sound consistent across episodes. Publishing consistency matters too. You should have a predictable release schedule, avoid missing more than one planned episode in the last 6 months, and ideally have at least 10 episodes published. Next, check your engagement proof. Do you have reviews or ratings on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? Do listeners interact with you through social media or email? Can you show listener testimonials or feedback? And is your completion rate above 60%? Your tracking infrastructure should also be ready. You should be able to implement promo codes, add unique URLs to your show notes, understand basic UTM tracking, and have a clear plan for reporting results back to sponsors. Then there is your media kit. Have a one-page media kit ready to send with your show description, audience demographics, sponsor packages, and contact information. You should also have at least 2 sample episode links that sponsors can review. And finally, check your brand alignment. Your content should meet mainstream brand safety standards. You should be able to explain why a specific sponsor is a good fit for your audience, and you should have identified 5 to 10 brands that naturally match your show. You can find the complete checklist in the blog and use it to identify any gaps before you start pitching. If your download count is modest, shift the conversation to the value markers sponsors care about just as much. Before pitching, make sure your show has the right fundamentals in place. Our guide on making your podcast more attractive to sponsors covers the setup checklist in full. Start by showcasing listener testimonials and feedback. Real feedback proves engagement. Share screenshots of DMs from listeners thanking you for recommendations, reviews that mention specific episodes, and examples showing that your audience pays attention and takes action. Sponsors see that and think, these listeners trust this host. That trust will transfer to our brand. You can also highlight category exclusivity as a premium option. Offer to keep their category exclusive, meaning no competing sponsors in the same product category during the campaign. Exclusivity reduces noise and can increase brand recall. You can charge a 40 to 60% premium for exclusivity because sponsors are paying for full attention within your niche. Another option is to offer a results-based pilot with low risk. For example, you could say, let us run a 3-episode test. If you do not see at least 15 conversions, I will extend the campaign by 2 episodes at no charge. Sponsors like low-risk tests. Once you prove results, renewals become easier. You can also bundle your podcast with other touchpoints. If you have a newsletter, a LinkedIn following, or a YouTube channel, combine those assets into one package. Sponsors can pay more for multiple touchpoints because they increase message frequency. For example, a package could include a podcast mention, a newsletter feature to 1,200 subscribers, and a pinned LinkedIn post. 3 touchpoints, 1 unified message for $800 total. And finally, show your growth momentum, even at a small scale. A show growing from 300 to 450 downloads in 3 months signals momentum. Sponsors are not only looking at where your podcast is today, they are also looking at where it is going. Chart your growth and include it in your pitch. Even modest growth proves you are building something real. The key takeaway is simple. A podcast with 500 engaged targeted listeners can be commercially more valuable to the right sponsor than one with 5,000 passive listeners. Sponsors pay for conversions, not just impressions. Every quality signal you build now compounds over time into either a show brands want to partner with or one they politely pass on. Your first pitch is your audition. The goal is to make it easy for a sponsor to understand your podcast, see the fit, and decide whether to move forward. Start by explaining why you picked them specifically. Do not send generic pitches. Explain why their brand makes sense for your audience. Reference a specific product feature or recent campaign and show that you actually researched them. For example, you could say, "I noticed your new AI budgeting tool launched last month. My listeners are freelancers who constantly ask me for budgeting software recommendations. I think there is a strong fit here." Then show them your audience in one short paragraph. Keep this tight. Include who listens, why they listen, and what problem your show solves for them. Add 2 or 3 demographic highlights. For example, my show serves 800 marketing managers at B2B SaaS companies navigating their first leadership roles. 68% are ages 28 to 40, 74% earn $80,000 or more, and 82% are based in the US. They listen for tactical career advice they can apply immediately. Next, present a specific offer with clear deliverables. Do not make the sponsor guess what you are proposing. Spell out exactly what they get and what it costs. For example, you could offer a 4-episode pilot with a 60-second host read mid-roll ad in each episode, a show notes link with a promo code, and a dedicated social post on LinkedIn. Then give them the estimated reach and total investment. You should also explain how you will track results. Sponsors need to justify their spend with data, so tell them exactly how you will measure performance. You could use a unique promo code and a dedicated landing page, then send a performance report after the pilot with total downloads, promo code uses, and link clicks. Finally, attach your media kit and 2 episode links. Make it easy for the sponsor to evaluate your show. Include your 1-page media kit and links to 2 episodes that showcase your style and audience fit. You do not need a 15-slide deck. 1 page is enough. Sponsors decide fast, so clarity beats volume. So, how do the best sponsors actually find podcasts to work with? Understanding where they look can help you position your show in the right places. First, sponsors scan competitor podcasts in your niche. Sponsors already advertising on similar shows are some of your warmest leads. They already know the channel works and are actively spending. Your job is to show them why your podcast is a better or complementary fit. Find 10 podcasts similar to yours and note their sponsors. Then pitch those brands directly with a message like, "I noticed you sponsor similar podcast. My show reaches the same audience with a different angle. Here's why we might be a strong fit." Sponsors also use podcast ad marketplaces and networks. Platforms like Podcorn, Gumball, and AdvertiseCast connect sponsors with creators, and many sponsors browse these marketplaces looking for shows that match their requirements. List your show on 2 or 3 marketplaces and keep your profile updated. Some sponsors prefer discovery tools over cold pitches. Another way sponsors find shows is through podcast directories. They search Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other directories by category. If your show is not properly categorized or your description is vague, they may never find it. Optimize your show description with clear keywords and choose the most specific category that fits your content. Make discoverability easy. And finally, sponsors ask for referrals from existing podcast partners. Word of mouth drives many sponsorship deals. If you deliver great results for one sponsor, ask them to refer you to similar brands. Most sponsors know other marketers who are looking for podcast placements. Make the referral easy by saying, if you know any other brands targeting your audience, I would love an introduction. Landing your first sponsor is exciting, but the first deal is really just the beginning. How you execute the campaign determines whether that sponsor renews, increases their budget, or refers you to another brand. Start by delivering exactly what you promised. If you said 4 episodes, deliver 4 episodes. If you promised a link in the show notes, include it every time. And if you committed to a results report, send it on schedule. Sponsors notice execution. Clean delivery builds trust and opens the door for bigger deals later. Next, track everything and report transparently. Send sponsors a simple performance report after the campaign ends. Include total downloads across sponsored episodes, promo code uses, link clicks, and any direct conversions you can attribute. And be honest. If results were weak, say so and explain why. Transparency builds long-term relationships. Then make renewal the easiest decision they make. Before the campaign ends, reach out with a renewal offer. You could say, this pilot performed well. Want to lock in the same rate for the next 3 months? Most sponsors prefer continuity over finding new shows, so make staying easy. And finally, ask for testimonials and referrals. If the results were strong, ask the sponsor for a short testimonial that you can use in future pitches. Also ask if they know other brands that might benefit from your audience. One happy sponsor can unlock several more deals through referrals. There are several common misconceptions that keep good podcasts from landing sponsors. So let's clear up a few of the biggest ones. You do not need 10,000 downloads to get a sponsor. Flat rate, affiliate, and niche sponsorships can work at a much smaller scale. Buzzsprout notes that while podcast networks typically prefer shows with 5,000 to 10,000 downloads per episode, you can start looking for sponsors with as few as 1,000 regular listeners. The key is to focus on fit, not size. The right sponsor cares more about audience relevance than raw numbers. Another myth is that sponsors only want celebrity hosts. Sponsors want results, not fame. A trusted voice in a niche community can often convert better than a celebrity with a scattered audience. Your credibility with your specific listeners matters more than name recognition. You also do not have to join a network to get sponsors. Networks can help, but they may take 20 to 50% of your revenue. Many small shows can make more money through direct partnerships. Networks work best when you want hands-off monetization and already have significant scale. Otherwise, start with direct deals and consider joining a network later if it makes sense. And finally, do not assume sponsors will find you if your show is good enough. Rarely. Most sponsorships happen because someone actively pitches. Sitting back and waiting can leave money on the table. Build your target sponsor list. Send 5 to 10 pitches per month. Track who responds, follow up, and treat sponsor outreach like a regular part of your podcast workflow. Sponsors are not always looking for the biggest podcast in the room. They are looking for the most aligned one. Show them who listens, why those listeners will care, and how you will track results. That is what makes the decision easy. Start with your checklist, fix the gaps, build your media kit, and identify 10 brands whose products your audience already uses. Then pitch them with clarity and confidence. The right sponsor for your show is not necessarily holding out for 10,000 downloads. They may be looking for the kind of focused trust that only a small, dedicated podcast can deliver. You might already have exactly what they need. Now, let's answer some of the most common questions about podcast sponsorship. First question: what do podcast sponsors look for first? Sponsors first check 30-day download numbers per episode, the industry standard measurement window, because this gives them a consistent baseline to compare shows. After that, they evaluate listener demographics, including age, income level, and geographic distribution, to confirm that your audience matches their target buyer. Shows where the audience closely matches the sponsor's customer get prioritized regardless of total download count. Next question: How many downloads do you need to get a podcast sponsor? There is no universal minimum. Podcast networks typically prefer 5,000 to 10,000 downloads per episode before signing a show. But sponsors working directly with creators regularly sign deals with shows that have 1,000 or fewer regular listeners when the audience fit is strong. Focus on audience alignment over raw numbers. The right sponsor cares more about who listens than how many. Next question. What is the most important factor for podcast sponsorship? Audience alignment. A podcast with 800 listeners who are all senior marketing managers at SaaS companies is more commercially valuable to a B2B software brand than a show with 50,000 general business listeners. The narrower your niche, the easier it is to find a sponsor willing to pay a premium to reach exactly that audience. Next question. What kills a podcast sponsorship deal instantly? The 6 most common deal killers are no predictable publishing schedule, no clear one-sentence audience description, poor audio production quality, missing tracking infrastructure such as promo codes and UTM links, content that conflicts with the sponsor's brand safety standards, and too many competing ad slots already running in each episode. Fix all 6 before sending any pitch. Next question. How do sponsors measure podcast ad performance? Sponsors track results through unique promo codes, dedicated landing pages, UTM-tagged links, and affiliate tracking platforms. They compare downloads per sponsored episode, promo code redemption rates, and show notes link clicks against their target cost per conversion. Clean tracking data from the first campaign is the fastest path to a renewal offer. And the final question, how do you get your first podcast sponsor when your download numbers are small? Lead with audience fit, not audience size. Build a one-page media kit with listener demographics, your publishing schedule, and 2 to 3 listener testimonials. Offer a short pilot of 3 to 4 episodes with built-in tracking, so the sponsor can see real results before committing to a longer run. Then pitch 5 to 10 brands per month, whose products your listeners already use, and follow up after 7 days if you hear nothing. That wraps up the most common questions about podcast sponsorship, and that brings us to the end of today's episode. The key takeaway is simple. Sponsors care about audience fit, engagement, and results, not just download numbers. For the complete checklist and examples, check out the full blog linked in the description. And if you're looking to find the right podcast for sponsorship opportunities, explore Million Podcasts. Thanks for listening to Million Podcasts. We'll see you in the next episode.